All right, we're good to go. We rigged it. Everything's good. Ashley will be happy with everything. All right, we ready to go? Because we got a lot we got to do. Okay, our goal is to finish Italian Baroque, Spanish Baroque, and Flemish Baroque. And get through that, because that is what's on our test for next week. That is not including French or Dutch Baroque, okay? So in your book, it's really sequenced like that in your book. So you want to continue reading through in your book all the way through Italian, into Spanish, and then into Flemish. If we do not finish Flemish today, doesn't matter. We're going to just take the test anyway. So does that make sense to everybody? And we need to make sure that we convey that to Ashley as well. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Oh, poops. Okay. Hold on. I need to open that one up. I need to open this one up. Okay. Very quickly, while this is all opening up, let's kind of do a quick review of a few things. All right. Naturalist painters during the Baroque period. What is their trademark?
It's like the chiaroscuro, but I don't know how to pronounce it.
Tenebroso effect. Very good. What else?
The impasto.
Yes, there's the beginnings of the impasto technique coming into play. What else?
The colors, they're like dark. Oh, and the lighting. Oh, but that was with the chiaroscuro.
Yeah, that's part of the tenebroso, that kind of dramatic lighting.
But in the moment.
Yes, you're capturing something in that moment. That's correct. That's really a characteristic of most of the Baroque works that we're going to look at anyway. But definitely, especially with a lot of the works that we saw by Caravaggio, you definitely get that in the moment of. Like what we see here with Judith slaying Holofernes by Artemisia Gentileschi. Again, that moment that she's slicing that head off of the body of Holofernes, right? And you can kind of see that there's a struggle that takes place there. And then we even talked about the two and how they were comparatively different. How Caravaggio addresses Judith and how Gentileschi addresses Judith are on two very different levels, right? Gentileschi definitely gives Judith props by making her a very powerful looking individual, whereas Judith in Caravaggio's is a little less unsure of herself as to whether or not she's even making the right decision. She doesn't look like she's enjoying this at all, right? What else, Nina?
Caravaggio one, why is there a big red sheet over there?
The backdrop here. Okay, so a lot of these artists had scenes set up in their studios, right? So you would probably put that drapery really to cover a bunch of stuff that's behind that space, for one thing. Two, what might Caravaggio be doing with that red drape? Well, why choose red in the first place? Yeah, definitely, to signify the blood. And then if you kind of look at it, it almost looks like it's this continuation of maybe blood exploding from the neck of Holofernes, because it's definitely directly over that body of Holofernes too, right? So most definitely, I mean, it's not haphazard. It's intentional, but it's definitely there to kind of act as a cover for whatever's behind it. He probably has oodles of paints and supplies behind that backdrop where that scene is located. So it's both functional as far as the studio space is concerned, but definitely he's not choosing it just at random. It's definitely intentful, right? Okay, and then here's kind of the aftermath of it. Judith and the maidservant with the head of Holofernes, they're collecting it. So if we're talking about in that moment of, when you look at this, what do you think is maybe happening here? If we're watching perhaps a play or a movie, what might be happening within the scene itself?
It almost looks like they got caught.
Yeah, like almost as if like Judith is trying to hush her maidservant, you know, like pausing, let's remain quiet, let's, you know, I hear footsteps kind of thing going on. You can kind of, I mean, we watch enough movies where we can kind of almost like, we've seen this act here, this scene a gazillion times, right? So really, it's really kind of funny looking at something as old as this, that they still use that in movies today. But that doesn't go away. It's just really kind of, when you stop to really think about how the longevity of some of these things there, that kind of cliche like, shh, I hear footsteps, is something that we see in 1625 from Gentileschi. So that's also very key. All right, so moving on. We talked briefly about landscapes and how landscapes become even more prominent during the Baroque period, how they kind of become more of an elevated art form. Before, artists would oftentimes just use it as just practices or studies and so forth, but it was never considered as elevated as a lot of the other work. Now this is in Rome, or rather this is in Italy, so it's still, what it has in the foreground there is obviously this religious image, right? Flight into Egypt. So what do we think is taking place here?
Mary and Joseph are going to Egypt.
Right, Mary and Joseph are going to Egypt, and who is Mary carrying? Baby Jesus. All right, and it's set amongst that big backdrop of a landscape, and that's really where landscapes start to kind of make a turn. There's always going to be some kind of human element in the foreground, but that human element is very subdued by the massive scale and scope of that landscape. But here's the thing, 99.9% of the artists doing landscape paintings at this time are doing them inside their studios. So this is going to be kind of relevant for like Mariana and Nina and even Ange. When we go to our competitions and you guys are going out and finding all those references and combining them into works, you're doing exactly what Carracci did. He went out, he painted a couple of different types of trees, then found a different type of hillside, did a whole bunch of sketches, took it back to his studio, and then voila, we have the Flight of Egypt. So really, this idea of combining lots of different studies in order to be able to make a final product is also something that's not really new. It's not a new concept. All right. So, so these artists here, you know, are working they're not working on site. They're not doing, which you guys don't really know anything about just yet, a plein air painting. So, so that's what's unique here, is that they're going back to their studio. They're just taking studies, they're going back to the studio and then producing the final work here. So, but again, here's that other thing. We've got to be able to divide this up into a naturalist or a classicist. And so looking at Carracci here, would we wager that he's a naturalist or a classicist?
Classicist.
Why would you say that?
Because the colors seem a little bit brighter and you can't see just one specific light source.
Exactly. It's very broad, right? You have a very broad image. There's no dramatic light source that would give you that idea that it would be a naturalist. And the colors are far more vibrant, has more of that pastel look to it. And that's kind of what is another characteristic of that classicist style. Here's kind of a close-up. Really doesn't look like Egypt too. That's kind of the other thing that is kind of funny about this, is that the setting is very like Tuscan. Like, yes, yep. Mary has a halo. And I bet if you were to look, if we had like a close enough look, Jesus probably would have one too. All right, but the one that we're going to focus on is The Love of the Gods by Carracci, same artist. And clearly what we're looking at here is a ceiling painting. It's done on a barrel vaulted ceiling. And what Carracci does here is he's combining two different styles of ceiling painting. We have the quadro riportato, to spell it phonetically, quadro with a Q, quadro riportato. and the De Soto in Sioux. De Soto